Good evening, chocolate people. Welcome to the Cocoverse. This is the Chocolate Life Podcast. This is your host, AJ, aka Mr. Cocoverse, and we have a special guest with us, Chaplain K. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm a little bit excited because I'm just watching stuff unfold, but at the same time, just trying to take it in stride because I don't think our 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 community understands the dynamics, and I hear that a lot every day. But I mean, understand on a metaphysic level. And when I say metaphysics, I mean seeing it with your own, not somebody else's own, but your own spiritual eye. What are people really looking at? Now, if they can describe it for themselves and see it, then I say more power to them. But that's why I said I'm excited because I'm seeing some things unfold, and I can
Right.
be excited even if nobody sees it but me.
Yeah. And it's like, and then one thing that a lot of, I'll say a lot of people in my age group, I'm going to say, let's just say 34, let's just say 30, let's just say mid 30s to 40, let's just say mid 30s to 45. A lot of people in my age group are, it's almost like, okay, we're the mature version of the younger cats that's like, okay, we're not falling for that. Because there's a lot of us in my age group that are just now catching it. We're like, oh, snap. Oh, yeah, we're not going to mess with that. We're not gonna mess with that. I see that right there. That don't look good, so I'm gonna stay away from that. You know, and so a lot of stuff that they're here, and then it's getting to the point to where I perfect example. I talked to my friend Jim Well. He's been in off. He's been in sports media, off and on, since Langston, and he spent time at ESPN, and he also did an internship at Fox. And one thing he was like, bro, I'm kind of getting tired of the news. He's like, I'm getting tired of the news. Like I'm I'm looking at, you getting my news from YouTube. I'm like, he named off Phil Scott and the African Diaspora Channel. He named off. I told him about Professor Black Truth and the Black Authority and
Hold on, before we get off into all of that, does our audience have the title and what we should be covering first?
oh, today's
Because I would like
title
for us to
is
cover
the
whatever the topic is first, and then we can free flow at the end and bring up some of the stuff that you are getting into. Because I don't think that's the topic, but I want to know what the topic is so we can kind of stay on
okay.
point.
The topic is the right to live, and I kind of paraphrased it on my notes. The right to life.
Well, I'm glad you paraphrased it and whatever it says to them, the right to life, and we know that is a statement that quote unquote the the people who call themselves they pro-life, but no, you can't quote unquote call yourself a group that's pro-life when certain people are being killed and don't even bother
You
you.
and yeah, and
So,
you're cool with it.
and secondly, when does one group of people in life have a right to life? Although we know that group, and that's up to me, it's a play on words because you making a whole group, not a whole planet of people. You're making a group to be in certain people's hand, which is scary in itself to call yourself a right to life. That's the name. People give themselves an LLC with the right to life because it sounds good. And what you're saying, you don't want people to have abortion. They need to have babies. At the same time, that's a legal term.
Yeah,
That's a legal term, and it falls under these people who worship whiteness. So I'm gonna when I frame things, and I'm gonna try to start doing it not just for myself, but trying to educate the audience to start finding their own words to counter some of the words that are being used now. Um, I told a friend today I'm not going to use white supremacy a whole lot now because there's nothing supreme about the people who worship whiteness. However, I can just use whiteness and people who pretty think they're supreme, but in essence, they've never been supreme. And even the concept itself, supreme, that means that you have authority. That means that you are above your subjects. Okay, when you say supreme, and really there shouldn't be any, there should not be any supreme other than the ruler, the creator. And in other words, we're moving ourselves out of that dynamic. I get it that people have used that term for a long time, but that's given people an arrogance to actually think that they are above other people. So the right to life. So you're telling me you can decide who has the right to life and I can't? Or if you, let's go a little bit farther, because now if you say you got the right to life, that means that you also decide who gets to die,
Yes, who gets to live and who gets to die?
who gets to
No, no,
live,
no.
and who
Who
gets to
gets to
die.
live and
So,
who has to die?
well, because I'm going to take it out of the arena that many people in the United States, because they'll talk about the pro-life issue and women have a right to abortion. You know, that's going to be a political football next year. For me, that's not a football that I need, want, or desire to tackle. That had never been my issue, as I told my family last year when they was talking about, well, a woman have a right to choose. I said, yes, a woman had always had a right to choose. However, that is not a black woman's issue. That's never been a black woman's issue. Abortion was created, the foundation of the abortion machine was created to destroy black families. Now, whoever want to have an abortion, so be it. That's your choice. As they said,
Right.
pro-choice and pro-life. But we start tap dancing in all of these dangerous arenas when we continue to let the whiteness uh, formulate or navigate or lead our discussions, our narratives, our stories. We got to take back control of, we have a right to life too, and nobody has stood up for us. So it is time for
Hmm.
us to stand up for ourselves. The same way what we see over there in Palestine now. Palestine or Palestinians are getting uh, their jigger makeup call, wake up call. Okay, I'm gonna use that word since that seemed to be a taboo word anytime we use it, but everybody else use it every day. I never understood that. It's always been a pejorative word, but I say out loud and often when everybody, that includes the police, the courts, the attorneys, the judges, the 5 year old, the 7 years old, the preachers, the teachers can stop calling, can use the word nigger anytime they frame it with us. Well, I guess we can call them pale skin niggers.
Hmm.
Europeans, whiteness, people who practice whiteness came from deeply melanated people. But for millions, millennia, that energy has been separated. So I would like to ask our audience tonight to start looking at their mindset. And I think we've gone over that before, but we're going to revisit it because I think we need to revisit it, especially since we're running into an age of censorship again.
Yeah.
Prime example, I was going to a meeting at the library, the public library where I live, on Sunday because I don't know if he's a professor or a medical doctor, was going to have a conversation. You okay?
Yeah,
Okay. It's
yeah.
a lot of static. I was a doctor that was going to have a conversation at the library on the conversation on Palestinian and Israeli crisis. That was the topic. My hunch is this person didn't just decide this and the library put it out as a notice, a public notice, without discussing it with somebody. Well, lo
Mm,
and behold, 2 days later, that conversation was canceled because everybody across the globe, because the power structure is in the hands of the people who worship whiteness right now. Even the people on the continent, and the people on the continent are doing some, I'm going to call it shady stuff, because anytime you allow the United Arab Emirate to uh, take up 20% of your country, uh, whatever you call it, part of your homeland.
GDP
Okay,
or the land.
I find that quite disturbing that a group of people who think they have certain privileges can still be acquiescing to whiteness, to power, to money, and destroying the foundation of humanity, and not recognizing that that's not going to continue to go over well, because young people, they have a right to life and they're going to exercise their rights. Whiteness has been killing us forever, but we are waking up and we are coming together because now we're deciding for ourselves that we too have a right to life, and you don't get to decide with your political structures across this globe that you have a right to have all the riches of the world. You get to make all the policies, and you're going to just kill us at will. That dog just ain't going to hunt no more.
Right.
It's just not. All of these philosophies that are being done, I'm gonna stick with the US for right now, because I'm gonna come to the, I'm trying to not to be excited, but I am excited because the young guy that's the president of Burkina Faso, he
Yes.
just went over to, he had his generals to go over to Rwanda, and he is now allowing himself in his army to be mentored by the Rwandan government. That made me so proud and so excited, because for young people that are listening right now, anybody try to tell you, if you say something about Israel, I'm gonna say this every week until you go find this information for yourself. Israel would not be a country without two black men. So all of these people who want to say black people are anti practicing anti-Semitism, so just mention to them they can think two black men that they're a country on Palestinian land. Let's not forget that, because all of these politicians over here are talking genocidal language, and it's quite disturbing when they say very publicly and very loud that the Israeli government has the right to do everything that they're doing. They don't have the right. They don't have the legal right. And the United Nations, which was set up by Europeans, which is another form of whiteness, they're not saying stop. No. That's the same thing they did with South Africa. We have to rise up ourselves. We, the only people, gonna rise up. Europeans and people who have that mindset are never going to rise up. The only thing they're gonna rise up is against each other to see how they can try to steal resources from the continent. And resources that they stole from the United States are all the melanated people. That was their floor when they got rid of their gold currency, because they knew they had enough of a floor that they can always put people above us. We are the United States floor. But we're here to say no more. So it may take us a few hundred years, but that's my goal to teach young people. Don't take nothing else from nobody. I don't care if it's your government and you are on the continent, you're in Europe, you're in the United States. My job as an elder in the community, I say an elder because I'm not 21, I'm not 31. So therefore, I'm an elder to half of the people who probably listen. Maybe not. I don't know. I have to let Mr. Coco Verse tell me who's listening every week. But I'm at an age that I've done a job long enough in spiritual care that I know what I'm talking about and I don't back down. And that's what I want to teach you guys what to do, how to do it. I'm not trying to tell you to follow any of these premises that people call religions or this is a form of spirituality. Most people practice religion. I don't care which one it is. It can be Buddhist, it can be Hindu, it can be Christianity, it can be what is it? What's the other one? It can be Jehovah Witness, it can be Muslims, whatever they are. Because I don't even understand Islam enough to even talk about that. Because I don't understand the Shiites from the Sunnis. But everybody is trying to say who has a right to live and who gets a right to have all the resources. So if you don't have the resources and somebody look like you and they're messing over you, then they still have a melanin deficient mind because it started with Sargon. You guys need to look that person up. That person was not
Hmm.
pale skinned, but they had a pale skin mentality because it happened after the last ice age. So therefore, when people came out of the ice age, their skin was not as pale as it is now. That happened over millennia. And you have to go do your own research to make sense of that. As I tell my nephew, I tell my host, I almost say my co-host. I'm the co-host. Tell the host every week. 1 hour is not enough time for us to cover everything that we give you a snapshot of.
Right.
It's just not. But certain things we need to learn so you can put it in your mental toolbox so you can pull from it while you're having conversations in your communities, wherever you are. We have to learn not only to walk and chew gum, but also have your periphery view doing a panoramic view at the same time. Now, imagine that dynamic because that's a mouthful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And then you get to decide what you pull out of that mental framework to have a conversation. But that does not mean that you don't have other things you could talk about. You just make a choice. This is how you learn how to expand your spiritual, not only vocabulary, but how you understand the spirituality that flows through you. That's my job. And I will continue to give little snippets every week, not only about my job, but how can I help you? And hopefully we will build a network of people who want to help other people become not as like I said, some of the words people use now, they use them so often, it just pull the meaning out. The word woke, okay? I want you to be not
Oh
only
my
just
goodness.
awake, which is physically awake, but be mentally aware and being spiritually astute. Because if you're not spiritually astute, it does not matter because you quote unquote you've learned a new lingo, you've learned how to identify with certain groups. The idea at this point in history is for us to become giants within ourselves. In other words, the spirit in us becomes so big that sometimes we feel like we can't contain it in our little bitty bodies. But we manage because it's spirit. That means spirit really is not uh um what's the word I'm trying to use? It's not stagnant. It is not, it's really not limited to our physical body, But until we can have an imagination to know that our spirit outgrow our bodies, our physical bodies, then those words may be a little bit to envision what I just said, and you may have caught it. I don't know. But yeah, we're in an era in a time where censorship is looking like it did before Germany became a country, really. Because half of the things we hear people talk about, even when they talk about the Israeli thing, and they say it as if these people are supposed to be there because they're using religious language, and they're using their non-religious stance, because none of these people were religious. So in essence, to use that in religious framework, I said that last week, it would be disingenuous. These people they were not the leadership, because we're talking about governments. We have to learn to look at our governments, whether we be in the United States, Mexico, China, Europe, all the countries in Europe, Russia, India, on the continent. The same way we talk about a Vladimir Putin, or we talk about General uh, Ibrahim, I can't pronounce his last name, from Burkina Faso. Just like we talk about
Ibrahim.
them, and somehow we can, yeah, we can call him, we'll call certain people, we'll call them tyrants, we'll call them certain things. And we can talk about their government, but we have to talk about all governments. That includes our own. Our government and our politicians are no more for freedom than they ever were. And now we get to see it. They have no they have no patience or tolerance for the Palestinians, and they do not care if they die, the whole group of them, because this is what that mindset that came out of the North. Now, however you want to look at the North, you can look at it as being Indo-European, European, the steppe. If you never heard of the steppe people, look it up for yourself, because we're just going to go for a few minutes. Some of the people who came out of what they call Germany, but Germany back in the early 1800s, let's go 1801. There was no such country as Germany. So when people talk about the Nazis, many times they'll say the Nazis took over Germany. Okay? That's pretty much, uh, if we're going to use that terminology, we can use it the same way they can say the Cherokee used to fight against the Choctaw. The Choctaw used to fight against the Shawnee. The Shawnee used to fight against the Arapaho. I mean, Apaches. You can use all of those names, but they were still on the North American continent. Now, if you can envision and use in that framework, that was the framework in the 1800s. There was no such country as Germany. So many of the people that you see with the hateful mentality in the United States right now, most of their people came from those people, regardless if you call them Germans, Russians, Ukrainians, Polish. These were all groups of people, just like they talk about the indigenous people on this plot of land. And now they have put them in little bitty categories where when Europeans came over here, all of them were just savages to them. That's their languages, not mine. They were just savages. It's just like everybody on the continent were just non-human. Which means if you had melanin in your skin, you were non-human to all of these people. So it doesn't matter. I think what I'm trying to get us to do is stop using as many of the labels as they do and let them use them, because that's the only way they can box themselves in to try to be important. We're important because we are indigenous. We're indigenous to this earth. We're Aboriginal people. That's all we need to know. If you
Right.
find out your lineage, your family's legacy, which I'm hoping that that's what you guys will start doing, looking up your family, your family you came from, regardless if you didn't like your mom, you didn't like your dad, you didn't know your grandma, you didn't know your granddad, and then now we're talking about four different people because your mom and dad had a mom and dad, your dad had a mom and dad. So we're talking about different people, and if you can look up those folks, then you can build your own foundation. And if you didn't have any people and you were adopted, then look at the people that took you in. And what did you learn from
Yeah.
them? Because there was really no such thing as these concept of being adopted anyway. Indigenous people just took people in and you were family because we came from the same
Hmm.
earth. And those are the dynamics we have to revert back to, not the quote unquote the DNA. Because if we talk about DNA in its truest sense, then you still have to ask, where did Europeans come from with their non-melanated skin? And how did they become so separated from humanity when all humanity started out with melanin? But as I keep saying, that's a discussion for another day. But many of these people who wreak havoc on the country we call the United States were some of the people who were fighting and who never stopped fighting each other until they were starving because Europeans don't mind about anybody starving if the elites. Now you can hold on to that word, elites, because the elites around the world are elites. They're not elite Republicans. They're not elite Democrats. They're not elites, quote unquote, uh, kings and queens. They're just elites. And they all want the same thing. They want to make sure you stay poor. And that includes on the continent. The dark face elites are the ones who have been selling out the continent for 60 years, ever since Latrice, Patrice Lumumba got killed because he was actually one of the architects of the Pan African movement. Although it has been given to Marcus Garvey, it was not Marcus Garvey. That is the reason we have to start doing our own research. That young man decided after the Congo got their liberation that he was to me General Ibrahim is now an incarnate of Patrice Lumumba. Man was walking tall, about to do some things on the continent that now uh, Burkina Faso, Burkina Faso, and Rwanda are kind of partnering together, and Niger and some of these other countries that you don't really hear them talk about very much right now because they're doing their
Yeah.
stuff very stealth. That's what we need to be doing because Rwanda is uh, a template for us. The people who call themselves Israelis, they could have gone to Rwanda and learned how to live together with the Palestinians. Mind you, I'm going to continue to say the Israelis are on the Palestinians' land. I don't care if they did, quote unquote, sign a treaty and gave them part of the land. It's still Palestinian land. It's not
Right.
Israelis' land. They're Europeans. The Europeans were killing them, not the Palestinians, not any of the Arabs. So all of this thing that we're looking at now, we need to put it in the framework the way it's supposed to be. Same way the Europeans came over here, killed our ancestors, pushed us away, pushed part of us over in this place we call Indian territory, took our legacy of being indigenous, named us colored people. Then all of these other dynamics played out. And then some of us started separating ourselves from our identity. And then we start talking that same language, like because this person is a drug dealer. They don't have a right to do certain things. This person is a thug, that language. Then you start diminishing people's lives. And we have to move away from that, from diminishing our own people lives instead of learning their stories and allowing them to tell their own stories. Because anything that does not that everybody that came out of Europe, let me say this real slow, are hateful people, because they're not. There are some wonderful people who came out of Europe, but we don't know who they are until they show us years of a behavior pattern. We have to treat them the same way they have treated us as far as observation. A European
Hmm.
or a melanin deficient mindset treat all melanated people the same way, with suspicion. You cannot be trusted. You're not on the team. And if you're not talking about other black people real bad, they have no use for us.
Right.
And just because we
Yes,
work at
Candace.
these jobs, we need to know that in our hearts. Get what we can out of the jobs so we can learn how to build for ourselves. Because we have to learn how to build everything we need. We are going to have to do it.
And I'm
Think
glad
about
you
this
brought
for
that
a
up.
moment, and then I'll let uh, Mr. Cocoverse pick up and do a few things that he wants to do. Um, Karl Marx, Joseph Stalin, Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, all of these people are European. All of these people decided they were going to be authoritarian, regardless if you call it socialist, communist,
Fascism,
uh, fascist, all of
fascism.
these different names. They came out, yeah, they came out of this mindset of the North, and I'm talking Europe now. They came out of this North and South dynamic because Mussolini was from the South. He was Italian. The rest of these guys were from the North. That, Stalin, Karl Marx, uh,
Hmm.
Hitler, all of them was from that area that was under the empires, the different empires, which actually came from the Roman Empire. And after it broke up, there were different fractions after the 5th century that they began to just fight and fight and fight and fight. But one thing the Cocoa verse need to understand is while they were fighting in the north, before there was a Mussolini, there were a whole group of more rulers. The Moors, which is interesting because Europeans never tell you about any of the names of the Moors. They never tell you about General Tariq. They never tell you about any of them. They ruled southern Europe for 800 years. You guys need to know that history. They taught them how to be civilized. Southern Europe. Northern Europe was still being their total barbaric self, and they had different ways of calling each other barbarian based on how they describe barbarian. So you would have to even go Cocoverse. Another thing for you to
Hmm.
do for yourself. Look up, I think it's called The Barbarians in Berlin. It's a real short read. You can probably find it on the internet. Maybe 6 chapters, less than 100 pages, maybe 150. But it's a good read because it gives you an idea on what the community look like that you don't learn in anybody's history class. Because the only thing Europeans try to tell you is to know. First of all, they talk about Julius Caesar's and they skip all the way to the 1600. How do you skip 1,000 years and then try to talk about the Crusades? How does it make sense?
Right.
It doesn't.
Exactly. Does
But this
not.
is how Europeans have tried to make themselves be um, somehow a model for the world, when in essence, they can never be a model for the world. And once you can understand that in your total being, you're not going to have any more use for European philosophy or concepts, because you're going to find that it's been distorted and have actually tried to steal our thunder. And we're taking our intellectual property back. We just are. These people, they were peasants. That's the best. They came from peasant people, and I say peasant because they were people who came out of the caves, and they were farmers, but not in the same way as hunter gatherers. They were farmers. They did hunter gathering, but they also hunted people, and they wanted to be like animals. In other words, they their initiation to their communities were acting like animals. I will give you guys more of that when I actually put this book together sometime next year. So you can start, and it's going to be a different kind of book. One thing I can tell you, it's not going to be just a read, it's going to be a visual where you can actually pull some of these resources that I will point you to. It's going to be a book of essays. So you can learn how to do your own reflections, and you can tell your own stories. This way, you can build your own narrative. So when you get in the position to run your own companies, whatever they may be, your own governments, you can use this template so you can educate your community, wherever you may be, on how people have been lying for centuries to us about us. And it's time for us to tell our own stories, but tell it with truth. We don't have to be insecure. The Moors occupied southern Europe for over 800 years. They never tried to force people to be Muslims. They allowed them to keep their own culture, the little bit they had, okay? Because they set up the libraries,
Mm-hmm.
they set up the schools, they taught them how to take a bath, they taught them all of the things you would call civilization. However, they're the people from the north. Okay, remember, these are the southern people. So I don't know what Mussolini's issue was when he became ruler, other than the fact that he wanted to look like the people from the north, because that's what happened with Spain. The people from the north who
Mm-hmm.
became very quote unquote pale skinned, very light complected. They killed all of the darker complected people. And that's the reason why you really don't see dark skinned people in a lot of places, because they killed them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say dark skin, I mean not necessarily brown like some of our hue, which is deeply melanated. I'm talking about people who had dark features. Original Germans don't look like any of these people. Original Spanish people do not look like Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do a lot of deep dives for ourselves, because if we got a group of melanated people can run the southern part of a continent rather, for 800 years, and they being absent from the whole story of this so-called to be in supremeness that Europeans are now claiming. Well, if they left 800 years of melanated people out, guess what else they left out? They left out 800 years of their debauchery.
Mm. Yep.
They cherry picked. So we have to expose why they cherry pick these very weak stories that they built themselves up to be, and why debauchery is still present. Because debauchery, all of this debauchery, and I call it debauchery and for whomever want to, challenge me on it, I'm okay with that. But the family structure, which came from a Set and Ashur, who were the parent, and these are mythologies of Haru, father, son, child. I mean, not father, son, father, mother, child. That's the Trinity. And now I'm veering off, but I'm not going that far. You had people who decided the religious concept and to remove the child. That comes from the continent. The continent tried to tell the stories how they understood their own lives. That's the only thing we need to
Hmm.
know as melanated people. When people say we're worshiping other folks, that's not true. For all you guys that's in the Coco verse will look up Mayat and then look up the concept. I think it will probably help you more than any of these religions because it allows you to be the master of your own soul, you to be the keeper of your own integrity, you to be the keeper of your own moral or ethical standard, and not all of these doctrines that were set up by all of these religious, whatever, legal traditions, because that's not what melanated people did or still doing. And we have to get back to that. And
Right.
yes, some of us have learned to dislike what our, and I have to say my grandparents, because you guys, some of your grandparents probably my age, if you are in your teens or your 20s or your 30s. So I'm talking about people who were back in the 1800, just like I'm talking about these so-called be rulers who came across who are now running this regime we call a country. They came from hateful people, so therefore all of these people who have been running our country have been hateful people. And that hate is not going to change. We just have to change because they're going to
Right.
eventually destroy themselves. I heard a story today. Biden in when we first started this podcast, I talked about they were talking about October that uh, Hamas bombed or did whatever the group did to the Israelis, and they keep recycling that same news. Now the news has come out that the Israeli government knew that Hamas was doing this for a year, and they even had people who were spying on the Palestinians to tell them this. Well, it was a setup, and I had already said that. My intuitions never
Hmm.
fooled me. I said that. Go. That was a setup, and but they fell right in it because. But I have to also reiterate that Hamas was created by Israel. I'm not sure if these group of people thought that they had the end with Israel because Israel gave them money to get them started. I don't know. Hamas do not represent all of the Palestinians. That
Right.
has to be said from us if we're going to do quote unquote a comparison. Hamas represents Hamas. I would have to, for me, Hamas is a puppet of Israel's government.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm
It's
gonna let you have the floor.
and I'm glad you brought that up because it's like the more and more we've talked about, the difference between Hamas and the other Palestinian people. It's almost people still are just people are still under the assumption that, oh man, the Palestinians are violent like Hamas, or vice versa. But that's not necessarily true. There are some good Palestinians who were murdered that weren't in Hamas, and vice versa.
Well,
And
that's the same thing they say about black people. Remember, there's some good black people. Just as long as you throw other black people on the bus, white people will use that same analogy. That's the same thing they said about the Indians. And really, I read a book from I think it was one of the groups from the west part of the country. The
Hmm.
statement was once said, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Well, guess what? When the red Indians, because all indigenous people did not start out red, and then the red Indians start saying the only good jigger is a dead jigger. They start repeating the same thing that the Europeans were saying. I'm going, so everybody punch down, and there is no more punching
Hmm.
down. Now you have to, everybody gonna have to make a choice now. You're gonna either be for justice or you're not. There's no in between. The Palestinian situation is the last outpost of colonization. Now, of course, some religious people going to use their religious language, but we going to talk about that in a year and a half from now. How, and I would raise the question: what if? I'm just going to say what if now, because I already know the answer, but I'm just for people who may not know the answer. What if all of these so-called be religious, prophetic people who are using their language to kill people? What if any of that is not true? Then why are people dying? You have to ask that question. What if none of
Hmm.
what they're talking about has ever been true? Because the Zionists who are they are using the people who practice Judaism. They're using them to push the language. They wanted a national identity, a national. Did you hear me? They want a national
Hmm.
identity the same way Marjorie Taylor Greene said she's a Christian nationalist. If you see nationalist, that is a white supremacist approach. I want a safe space for me, and you be damned. And I don't care if I have to kill you to get it, because that's one thing you guys in the Coco verse will learn. Just read that little book. It's a very short book, but it talks about the barbarians from Berlin. And Berlin was not always a part of a country
What we
called
done?
Germany.
Yeah.
Berlin existed even before there was a country called Germany. How about that?
Hmm. And
There
at
was an
different time, and a
empire.
lot of,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
and a lot, and that a lot of people don't understand. Like you said, it went under the regional names, and then it also went under different empire names because I think one of the names was Bavaria, um, the region or the Bavarian
Well,
region. That was one of the names, and a lot of people
well,
even
and that was, but and see, the Bavarian region is a southern. Well, we still getting back to that north and south stuff. Bavarian was where all of the dukes and the duchess lived at that time. That was pretty much uh,
thus
royal
the ancient
society.
castles, basically the ancient castles in
Yes,
the
yes, but
modern
that's where they
German.
live. They live
Yeah,
there, but and they were fighting against the other part of what you call Ukraine and what you now call Russia. And like I said, these 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 people have been doing they've been doing some wicked stuff for a while. But go ahead.
yeah. Um, Earlier when you were talking about, when we're working these jobs, we have to be careful about, you know, how we're moving and how we're talking and stuff like that. And it made me think about when I first came off active duty and moved to Edmond. Every job that I worked, I was very, very careful. Even when I was in the military, I would, because I was at one time I was the only black guy in the unit at one time. I can only remember at the most. Mind you, this is when I was in the army. This is when I became an army musician. In the army band unit I was in, at the most there were five black people, or if you want to add other melanated people, there was probably 10 at the most, but 5 out of the 10 were quote unquote indigenous black. And so I was always careful around about what I said and who I said it around and things of that nature. And people, and there were different people. Well, hey, AJ, how come you only hang out with these guys? Like, well, I feel comfortable around them and I don't really know you like that. It wasn't it wasn't me disrespecting them or anything like that, but it was just along the lines of, you know, I really didn't know them like that, so I'm not going to really expose my thoughts or what I'm saying around that person like that. You know what I'm saying? So I was very, very picky and choosy about who I spoke around and what we talked about around those certain people. And so I remember during those last couple of years I was in the military, you know, I was always being asked, "Hey, AJ, you look like you're kind of on edge." Like, people, and then, like when we be on tour, it was like, "Hey, AJ, come hang out with us." I'm like, "No, I'm good." And the people that I did hang around, it was almost like they were a lot like me, but you know, we pretty much stayed to ourselves to a degree. And so, and then when me and those other people were hanging out together, everybody was always asking, "Hey, why are you guys why are you guys only discussing this, or why are you guys always only talking about this?" And the answer was, that's what we like to talk about. It was always
What?
somebody listening. It was always
But
somebody. It
it's
was almost like,
interesting that. But okay, just well,
say that
picture
again.
this for a moment. Uh, I said, picture this um, for a moment. Whenever we have a conversation, and I mean in the public, because the public has been conditioned. Remember, these are spirits. So spirits, they work in spirit of insecurity, not distrusting. These are spirits around, and this is how I operate because this is the arena I work in. So therefore, I'm telling people, I'm telling you guys out loud. So hopefully, you can start naming the spirits that operate around you. I operate in an arena where there are a lot of distrusting spirits manifested daily. I work in an arena where people are very insecure. Those are spirits. So therefore, all of these
right,
spirits are operating in different people all the time. So it's up to you and I as individuals to help your own spirit mature. So whatever you manifest, you've already worked on your own dynamics. So you can see what's going on in somebody else. That doesn't mean you have to acquiesce to it. In other words, if a person is a bully, they want to get other people around them to operate in fear or intimidation. But if you don't want to operate in that, then stand your
hmm
ground. Let them be whatever they are. It does not mean you have to take on that particular spirit. And that, but this is the language. My hope is that we can, or you guys can embrace so we can learn to teach other young people as they're growing and maturing. And then when other people have children, we won't continue to have children who are afraid just to be themselves. Many of our children, I see their faces, and their faces have sadness because they live in environment that intimidates them all day long. They live with families who are scared to death that they're gonna lose their children, and it's just sad. And we have to make some changes. That's why I said we have to do more working on us, working on building our positive energy in us. So when we get around other people who don't have as much positive energy, we can help them to nurture that.
Right.
That's my job. That's what I do.
And
Now, if people want, go ahead.
I want to piggyback on that
Go ahead.
last
I'm sorry.
thought. I want to piggyback on that last thought. Um, I remember when I was in my teens, and even being at family events and stuff like that. Um, like I remember, I re, I, re, I remember this. I remember one time we went to Chicago, and this was like one of the few times mom and daddy stayed at Aunt Rosemary's house. And so one time Becky's best friend came over and she introduced Arletty and introduced me. And it was the way she introduced us to her best friend that kind of rubbed me the wrong way and kind of made me um it kind of made me have a low um it kind of it kind of shot my confidence. It kind of shot my confidence low. And the way she was like, this is my cute cousin. This is my cute cousin Arletty, and this is just his brother Trey. And I was like,
Oh,
wow. And this is her best friend Kitu. And I was like, and so like for the rest of the time, like and growing up, it was like anytime we was in Chicago and I just happened to see Kitu, even though I thought she was a very, very attractive young lady and everything, and she was very, very friendly, but it was almost like because of the introduction that my cousin gave her in reference to me, it was almost like, uh, I don't want to be in the same room with this young lady because she probably don't think she she probably doesn't think very highly of me because the way I was introduced. And so
well,
like,
but let me help you with that a little bit because I think they need to be expanded because I'm sure other young people who are listening to you right now probably can identify with that statement. And when you're confident, even if somebody is doing it in jest or as you say jokingly, they don't know how they're affecting the person that they are targeting that information to. And yes, that is helpful. I mean, that is harmful. And like I said, sometimes we cut each other down and don't know it. And when you start cutting away people's spirit, because as you said, it affect your confidence comes from your spirit. So that means that
hmm
cuts into your your moral fiber. And you can only have a moral injury so long before it start peeling away at the core of your humanity. And if you are a quiet person, and of course we'll get into the dynamics of personality just a little bit. I'm not, quote unquote, I'm a chaplain. I'm not a therapist and all those things, but I see dynamics. I work with dynamics, so I can give you as much as I work with and talk about how all of these elements have a mental and a spiritual component. But guess what? If your emotions, which is the most elementary part of us, okay, that's the first thing a baby learn to do. A baby learn to identify and answer and respond in emotions. They hungry, they're wet, they're sick, don't want you to be bothered with. They gonna cry.
Yeah.
They're gonna show their emotions. So that's their action from something that is diseasing them. So the emotions get to dictate. It can, unless you start teaching the emotion how to be shaped by more than just emotion. But when the emotion and the mental get into that fight within the body, the emotion can cut off the spirit, because the spirit can get to be immature and don't want to grow. And anytime it doesn't want to grow, it allows the emotions just to get out there and fight. And
Hmm.
and so we have to pull back and balance the emotions, because the emotions should not be taking advantage of your mentality. They should be in
Right.
balance. They should be in balance, but your spirit should be dictating both of them. And that's a balancing act. Because if there is something that uh, either has been scarred, that makes the spirit have to work more. And if the spirit pulls back, then the emotions and the mental start into this battle to see which one gonna win. So sometimes the mental just talk you into just being quiet,
Very true.
or we continue to psych ourselves out so we don't do anything, and we become resigned to certain things because we don't want to get hurt. In other words, we don't want to feel that, so we put up a wall. Okay. So now two parts of your total being is being stifled. Your emotion being stifled because your spirit is now dictate that you don't want to be hurt. And then your spirit is your emotion is your emotion is stifled, and then the spirit is not growing. Instead of the spirit owning and saying, I am hurt. Okay. In other words, I feel
Right.
this. Now what do I do with it? Now therefore you just grew, because you took ownership of that emotional component, but you didn't let it stay there. Now you decided in the psyche, what am I going to do with this? Be honest. That's spirit. Honesty is spirit, meaning I'm going to be honest with me. And then if I have to, I have to be
Right.
honest with the person who just hurt me, and I'm going to go tell them. So you see how the process of spiritual growth has not been taught to us, period?
Yeah.
We've been taught to be religious, not spiritual mature. And maybe we can start on a journey where we give our audience enough information that they want to go on a journey maybe in 6 to 12 months, or we start growing. So therefore, as we grow as a group, we can start teaching each other in our community how to grow. Because the more we grow and the more we teach others to grow, we will see growth around us. And we'll see people flourishing. And that really can start with young people, because young people are more malleable to just address certain things right now. Older people have gone into a cocoon. Yes, there are some that's out there fighting, and I appreciate them fighting. Like I said, I appreciate the young general from uh, Burkina Faso
Burkina Faso.
going to the elder statesmen. Yes, to the elder statesmen in uh, Rwanda, learning that. I'm going, that is beautiful. He's 35, this guy's 60, like 67, 68, something like that. Anyways, this man talked about how he had to teach all of these people who came out of a genocide everything. In other words, he loved his people. And really, Rwanda has a lot of things they can offer the world. but they haven't been looked at. I tried to actually get my hospital when I used to be in this other state to look at Rwanda and some of the things they did in their hospital to bring wholeness to people. I'm not sure the person just didn't like the idea, or he didn't like the idea because it didn't come from a European mindset. I don't know. But he never thought it was a good idea and never took it on. And now, I was gone a few months later. But yeah, I tried to use Rwanda, I think in 2017, as a model to learn some stuff we needed to know. So as a group, as a Cocoverse, there are enough examples of what we've done for the last, I'm just gonna go 400 years because we've been extremely effective in keeping the earth balanced as well as it's been balanced
Yeah.
for more than uh, 400 years, but it's been imbalanced because these entities, once they came out of the ice age, have been ravishing the earth and been destroying humanity. That includes whole creation, because their mental and their spiritual mindset has always been the spirit of hatred. They operate on a spirit of hatred, and with hatred becomes murder, envy, rebellion, jealousy. All of those different things comes from spirit of hatred. And then they decide to set them up as being the model for life. How about that? Like, no,
Yeah.
we're good. And they do love to practice censorship. The Assyrians was the first group, a whole group, to do that when they decided to destroy the history of the melanated people that set up the kingdom that we call Kemet, because that was a kingdom that came from
Hmm.
all of the pastoral indigenous people on that whole continent. It wasn't just quote unquote one group of people. There was no such thing as Egypt. That's a European word. And Kemet was a kingdom. And I know half of you guys in Cocoverse, you never heard that. But Kemet was a kingdom. Kemet was not Egypt, because there was no such thing as Egypt. And all these people came from different backgrounds. They came from West Africa. They came from the Northwest Africa. They came from South Africa. They came from the interior and Central Africa. And they created what you see now. Well, they created what we see from the pyramids, because it's been destroyed since then. And the Europeans have come over and just taken out all of the artifacts. And think about that. All of the Aboriginal people artifacts are in European museums. It's like, why? Don't you have your own people, your own creation, your own stuff? Why are our stuff in somebody else's museums?
Hmm.
Why is there a
And
statue of Geronimo in Fort Seals?
man,
It should not be. A replica of Geronimo is in Fort Seals. Should not be there.
I remember the
But
first
that's
time I
that
saw it.
conquering spirit, because mhm, they embarrassed Geronimo, and Geronimo, quote unquote, he did like Sitting Bull. He did what he gave himself up for his people. And when he went to DC, they embarrassed him. So, no, we're not acquiescing anymore. We're going to build our communities, and then we're going to start teaching our children, because our children need to be taught differently. They're trying to destroy the schools in the United States. So it's time for us to start doing some things differently. That's all and that's all I got,
Yeah.
Mr. Cocoverse.
Um, just a little more tad bit, and then we're gonna close this thing out.
Okay.
Like it was, it's just I've been to, like, even when I was touring in the military, perfect example in Alaska. There are places where there are monuments of certain chiefs and totems uh to represent those chiefs in different parts of Alaska. And I was just and then on top of that, there are pale skinned people that live in Alaska that act like, you know, those chiefs and, indigenous people don't exist. And I'm like, wait a minute, they kind of outnumber y'all up here. What are y'all talking and acting like this for?
Mhm.
Like, this makes no sense.
Well, but it's the same way when you walk by a black person all day long and you act like you don't see them. And they're cleaning your house, they're cleaning your buildings, they're doing all of this work, but this mindset is as if they have no value. Like I said,
Right.
who has the right to life? Which, in essence, the question is everybody. No one
Hmm.
person get to tell another person you can't have life. That's not your decision. And I'm not talking about quote unquote the quote unquote abortion issue, because those used to be fetuses until certain people decided they wanted a population that looked like them, and they start telling women you can't do this. Well, really, women weren't even trying to do that before that.
Hmm.
They was just trying to make sure the white ladies had the babies that they wanted to look like them. Because remember, China used to kill all of their children, and especially when you were a girl. So you got to start asking the question: when did all of these behaviors become a part of society, human society? Because it wasn't you didn't see that in Kemet. You really don't see that even on the continent now. Even though they'll say they're the poorest people, even when they, destroyed the countries and had people being very poor and they malnutritious, they need to stop having babies. Okay, but who decided that? Once upon a time, and that's a well kept
You,
secret. 3 months ago,
y-
Italy didn't have a baby born. So Europeans they have not only have they women have decided they don't want to have these children, uh, but they've been killing so many people, they're not reproducing anyways.
hmm
So they will be outnumbered. But it's not the numbers, because it's never been quote unquote the numbers. Europeans just trying to make sure they have the power. That's why they are hell bent on having AI. They have AI. They don't have to. I mean, drones. That's AI.
yeah.
Uh, Sell us. That's so they can replace us. Remember, the first drone in the United States, first bomb killed people in Tulsa. First drone killed the young man in Houston, Texas. Was it Houston? Dallas? Which one
It was
was it?
Dallas.
You know the young man they sent the drone in to kill
Dallas.
him. Okay,
Hmm.
so you see, you got a bomb being dropped right after World War I. Instead of you dropping bombs on quote unquote your enemy, well, we are and were and will be the enemy of that mindset. So don't we shouldn't ever forget that. So while this man who people are slowly learning is not a genius, he's the Elon Musk man. They don't mind by putting power in, the government does not mind by putting power in individual hands as long as the individual are working on their behalf. Remember, Elon Musk would not have money if the government was not feeding his pockets.
Mm-hmm.
We're making Elon Musk because it's the taxpayers' dollars, but at the same time, this is a man who just told people to F themselves the other day on TV, on national TV. It's like, okay, that's gonna go over well. But yes, we have to take our own rights back, our rights as human beings. We get to decide, and we have to tell these folks who try to tell us that we're quote unquote anti-Zionist. You need to think two black men, otherwise you wouldn't even be a state. And they would know who you're talking about, but you need to know. You need to know and stand firm on it so they can stop thinking they deserve anything. No, you don't. Don't nothing happen until black people make it happen. I think if
Mm-hmm.
they were alive today, they would probably say, no. But they had good hearts. And both of them could have passed for white men. You know this thing, this biracial things, but they didn't. They didn't
Yeah.
want to because it wasn't their experience.
Yeah.
So, but I've enjoyed being with you. You want to tell our audience to just uh, continue to tell other folks about us so we can
Yes. Yes.
start growing and possibly
Please.
start putting information in the chat on some of the things we can help people walk through, some conversations.
Yes. Yes. Um, yes, this is normally the scheduled time. Friday nights at 10 p.m. That's when we go live for this particular podcast. And um, please share the podcast. Um, in the near future, we're gonna put out information for PayPal and um, Cash App, so we could, you know, get accept donations to, so we could, build the podcast up, so we could create better content and just keep building our network of people bigger and bigger and bigger. So, yes, please share this. And until next time, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. All right, be blessed, chocolate people. All right, this is your host, AJ, aka Mr. Cocoverse. Be safe. Peace.